All right, welcome back, and thank you so much indeed for staying with Morning Live. Now, the South African Broadcasting Corporation went out to the public to ask for submissions and comments, of course, on its editorial policies. The intention really for the exercise was to make sure that South Africans were widely consulted and that the final policies will be compliant with the law and also reflective of South Africa's view as much as possible. But joining us now is Ayanda Makaula. She is the project manager of the Editorial Policy here at the SABC, and she'll tell us more as to how the road shows went. Sis Ayanda, good morning to you, and thank you so much for coming.
Good morning. Good morning, Palesa, and good morning to the rest of the Morning Live viewers.
Thank you so much indeed. I'm not even going to ask as to how things went because I know the past few weeks were very busy for you guys.
Yes, they were. We have travelled 9 provinces, 3 towns per province, inviting our public to comment on our 2004 editorial policy. Yeah. As you would understand that since the 2004 editorial policy, there's been a lot of developments in the broadcasting space. So, which is why the SABC is compelled not only by the Act and the ICASA Code of Conduct, but also just to honor and to review some of the changes and implement some of the changes that have happened in the broadcast space. So it's been quite an exhausting process,
I can imagine.
But also quite enlightening, because we are just so proud of South Africans for their continued affinity to the broadcaster.
Did they come out in large numbers, though?
Absolutely, Palesa. And the passion of these submissions, because we not only regard the online submissions as valid, but we had informed our public that the sessions are recorded. So we also regard those sessions and the public hearings, the comments that have been made by the general public, that those submissions are quite valid. We are in that process now, embarking on phase 2 of the process. Yeah. We've received online over 200 submissions, and now we are busy, the team is busy collating some of the verbal submissions that we've received so that we could actually ascertain the total number of submissions received. So it's been quite a process.
Just before we talk about that phase 2, Sis Ayanda, so you're saying you traveled all 9 provinces and 3 towns per province. Are you happy as the SABC that you got to reach as many people as you wanted to?
Palesa, we are incredibly happy, but much more happier than the response that we received from South Africans.
What are they saying? What are their concerns?
Their concerns are just, as you would understand, the policy itself is it comprises of 6 policies, which have a lot to do with language, religion, universal access. So there's a lot, and programming. So there's been a lot of concern from our members of the public who have a very strong affinity to the SABC around issues of language. They are concerned about the preservation of language in the programs that the SABC commissions and airs on radio as well as television. They're also concerned about, religion, whether, there should be an inclusion of a much more inclusion of other religious groupings within our religious programs. So there's been a general concern around language, religion, as well as the news and current affairs, because there's been a general perception that the SABC is biased towards certain, political parties and the number on the experts that it invites in its programs. But we've taken those concerns. I mean, some of them are policy related, but some of them are policy related. So we're busy sifting through those to make sure that what can be done now from an implementation perspective, and what we could then capture in the draft policy, so that we can go back to them to show them that their concerns are indeed valid, and we've captured them while we are busy drafting the new policy.
Yeah, talking about news and current affairs, in Jebacho Ayanda Guti, charity begins at home. Have you consulted with the staff internally? Because remember, there were concerns about the newsroom being captured, if that's the correct word to use. So have you spoken to the SABC staff members on these issues before going outside?
Palesa, we are not, the news and current affairs staff have been really our stars. They've taken it upon themselves to form committees within the newsroom, to consult on this process. We first consulted with them, and we consulted all of our first citizens at the SABC prior to the national launch, the public launch of this process. And I must say, I've just been quite pleased with the SABC News and Current Affairs staff who have just constituted committees, and they have made quite a substantial submission in which we are busy reviewing at the moment.
Right.
So we are really quite grateful for the contribution that has been made by the current news and current affairs staff and the way they've organized themselves and really taken ownership of this process.
Yeah, great stuff indeed. Now you're on phase 2, you're consolidating every information that you were able to gather, and then what happens next?
We're busy consolidating. Once we actually have a draft as the committee, we will then submit to the SABC Operations Committee for comments and concurrence. And once the document has passed through the hands of the Operations Committee, we will then take it to the new SABC board. As you would understand, we have a new SABC board. Then they would need to comment on the draft. Once they've commented on the draft, we will then, which is a very important phase of this editorial policy review, we will then go back to the provinces that we had visited, all of the provinces, and for further comments. We will then allow the members of the public to interact with the document and to look at their inputs, if their inputs have been captured. And then we will then have an opening and a closing date. And once we have a closing date, we will then, and we've captured all of the further comments that have been received, we will then take it back to the SABC board for final glance before filing it with the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, which is ICASA. Once ICASA is satisfied in the manner in which we've consulted, then they will then send us a written confirmation that indeed we can now call it the 2018 editorial policy.
So there is still a long way from what you're telling us. There's still a long way, but in the meantime, we're still using the 2004 editorial policy.
Yes, the SABC is currently using the 2004 editorial policy. We envisage that we will finish the process in February of 2018, if all goes well.
Let's leave it at that, Ms. Ayanda. Thank you so much for coming through, and all the best going forward.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to South Africans once again.
Thank you so much indeed. Ayanda Makaula is the project manager of editorial policy from the SABC, talking to us about the road shows and, of course, how far they have come in terms of visiting the 9 provinces, 3 towns in each province. So, yeah, we'll wait and see how things unfold. We're taking a break here on Morning Live. When we come back, your news at 8 will follow. Stay tuned.